Hello everyone, welcome to my second proper vlog of my series. I'm going to try and upload one vlog every week. I will try, that's the operative word. So let's see how that goes, and I will try and upload it every Monday or Tuesday of the week. So here goes. Today's topic is about the survival of international NGOs or INGOs. So this is a big topic that's been being discussed for a while now. A lot of it revolves around the validity of the work that most large organizations, non governmental organizations, are doing based in the global north but working in the global south. And a lot of questions are being raised about whether or not these organizations or these INGOs are relevant in the system that we're talking about today, or rather the dismantling of the system that we're talking about today. So, the large INGOs that we normally refer to in these discussions are the global organizations like, and I know I'm taking these names just randomly, it's Oxfam, Save the Children, Plan, of the world, the big five, as we call it. More than five, actually, if you look at it. But, these are the oft quoted organizations, and they're the ones that are also the most active globally in the work that they do. But of course, tagged to them is a whole bunch of other organizations as well who are also international, and we'll come to the international part of it a little later now. But the issue here arises that these organizations have been working in the field of development for for decades now. I've worked with a few of them as well during my my past life as a international development professional in Pakistan. Um, and they dominate the industry when it comes to intermediary organizations. They've got massive networks, country offices in multiple locations around the world, a massive expat staff, mostly global north, but also global south in terms of some of the countries that they work in. They do hire local staff as country heads or office heads, but majority of these do come from the global north. And there is a lot of question and doubt as to what their validity now is in the world of international development assistance, which many of us, myself included, are challenging. There is talk that they are intermediary organizations that take the chunk of the money from donors and then channel them onto recipients in other countries, and that maybe that role needs to now start diminishing. And this is related to all the discussions on what we call localization, as in, money flowing directly to recipients. Also, a topic I'll speak to probably in a separate vlog, but I'll just allude to it a little later on here. My issue is twofold. One is the issue of the idea of international. And I've written about this in a paper that I wrote and which was published in late 2023, which is about envisioning an alternative ecosystem for global development and humanitarianism. It was published by the Center for Humanitarian Leadership in September 2023. And in that, I question the idea of the I. Why are only organizations that are based in the global north seen as international NGOs, as the INGOs? If we're talking about a world which wants to see collective action across borders, we cannot just assume that organizations are only international if they are based in the global north. There are a number of organizations that are based and are homegrown organizations in many countries of the global south that work outside their own countries, be it in other countries of the global south. You have organizations like BRAC in Bangladesh that is now an international NGO. I've used that as an example. Many African NGOs work in other African countries as well. But these are not seen as INGOs. So for me, the questioning of the I is extremely important. Why are we only limiting ourselves to the idea that INGOs only occupy space in the global north and they are the only ones who have the right to work in the global south? That's one. The second issue is with obsolescence and of the whole idea of the mechanics and modalities of what these traditional big five, big seven, big 10, whatever INGOs in the global south do. Now, we know majority of them are advocates for different issues, global issues, but we also know their main modality of working is via projects, donor funded projects. And they have conventionalized the project approach for many, many decades now, right? So they put in a proposal for funding to FCDO or USAID or the EU for a project in a particular region or a country. They get that money, they implement, right? And on the sides, they do advocacy as well. But majority of their bread and butter is this, right? It's implementing projects in other countries, and that's why they have country offices in so many different countries, because they want to establish a base there. And there's been a lot of discussion about whether or not these country offices should exist at all. I argue in my paper that they should not exist at all. And that they should remain global in their worldview and in their advocacy. So that's the second thing. I mean, is the work that they're doing so essential for the world that they can never be non relevant? I would challenge that. And I think, first of all, we have to move beyond the idea of what we are referring to as an INGO. We are way off base if we think that it is only this handful of organizations that are the real INGOs, right? They're not. You need to broaden your view on that, on international. You need to get out of that little comfort zone that we have. Secondly, every organization has an expiry date, right? All of us have an expiry date. I have an expiry date. I think I've already expired and I'm way beyond my expiry date. But anyhow, so we all have to come to some level of obsolescence in our life because the world is changing. And it's not just that if we don't change with it, we will become obsolete. It is that some elements will always go obsolete, right? And we can't help that. It's the whole idea of, the AI debate, that AI will make human skills obsolete at one point in time. And we're probably not far away from that. So in the same way, INGOs, at least the global north ones, have to accept that a point may come that they may have to be obsolete. For the time being, that's not going to happen at all, right? But during that period, there needs to be a complete rethink of what the purpose of these organizations are. My personal opinion is that they must be global advocates. They must not be project implementers at all. If you really want to talk about localization, which is, I will challenge that immensely, and I don't agree with the concept. I think it's very underthought and very limited in its scope, and we'll come to that in another vlog. But if you really want to make an impact, you can't do that through projects. I think international aid assistance has proven that. The project approach just does not work and was never built to work, even frankly. So what is the other thing that the world needs to be able to be part of a common community? It's advocacy, and it's advocacy on global issues. I think a lot of these INGOs have professionalized advocacy as a project as well, and that's where I think the rethink needs to occur. Advocacy is not projectized. Advocacy is yelling your lungs out in any way you can about a particular issue, whether it's girls' education, whether it's universal health coverage for all, whether it's access to justice, whether it is financial inclusion, what have you. If a lot of us in the developing world who are unable to voice our advocacy efforts for various reasons contextually, we need that support internationally. We need that support to come from others who have the voice and the leverage and are able to do it. That's where I see the role of these organizations, not in implementing projects to fund women's empowerment programming or, basic education or, children's what have you. Those are just, many of those are one-off, and I'll be challenged on this, and feel free to do that and challenge me. I speak from my own personal experience and observations. In the long run, this does not work to help to develop a country's own growth, national growth. That has to come internally. But I think the idea of advocating, be it putting in legal petition after petition, be it going from one platform to another, and really sticking to that advocacy by saying, for instance, let me use an example of Palestine, right? So a lot of the big INGOs have been putting out statements for ceasefire and about, the end of the war in Palestine and the genocide, but they are all part of the same system that is creating that genocide. They are all still taking money from the exact same donors of the exact same governments that are perpetuating this conflict, and the murder and mutilation of thousands of children and men and women, and the complete destruction of a people. So that contradiction has to end. That's not advocacy. That's just saying, okay, we're doing something, we're ticking something off the box. No, real advocacy is to detach yourself completely from these power structures and work absolutely and only for the people that you stand for. And that's a hard nut to crack for these organizations because their bread and butter is based on this funding. That's what keeps them going. And this will also shrink their numbers to a large extent. But for me, that is the real crux of change. That is the real support that I think communities need globally. They do not need an organization based in the UK or the USA or Canada bringing a project of a year, 2 years, 5 years to a region in Africa or South Asia or the Middle East or South America and saying, this is what we're learning about, leadership or humanitarian development or about education and what have you. That's more of the same. And that is exactly the system that we are challenging to bring an end to. So I think it's really important for INGOs, the way they are conventionally being promoted or thought of or interpreted as, to really, really consider that you are at the moment not part of the change. And the way things are going and the way you are still operating, you will never be part of the change. So if you really want to be part of the change, you will have to seriously think about whether or not you are relevant as you stand. A. And B, if you can remain relevant in whichever way that you are thinking of moving into. Because the only thing you're thinking about right now is relevancy. And how can we stay afloat? And how can we still exist? Maybe you don't need to exist. I know that is something none of you want to hear. We all have our jobs and our livelihoods associated with it. But look at who you are supposedly working for. You're supposedly working for people who are marginalized and vulnerable and who have very few options, if at all. And you have a job that keeps you afloat. You travel around the world. You can be seen as, I've spent 30, 40 odd years in this business, worked in X number of countries. And so, it's built my career. The nonprofit sector should not be about building careers. I know that. That's why I left it. But I think if we really want to think what role INGOs need to be playing, we need to think about the fact that we need to get rid of the I. And there is some further work I've done in that where people have challenged that, and they've rightly challenged it with a nuance that needs to be, and I will talk about that at a later stage. But we really, really need to think about whether or not the world needs organizations like this anymore in the way they currently operate. So I'm going to end this there. Thoughts, comments, agreements, disagreements, please feel free to leave them in the comments. And I will also be uploading these videos to my new YouTube channel as well, which you can subscribe to if you like. The link will be in the post above this video. So have a wonderful rest of the week, and we will see you again next week. Goodbye.